wait for that. Point out the major event that get us to this point so far was the static fire of the Falcon 9. That was 5 days ago. We rolled the Falcon 9 with the Dragon capsule to the launch pad, and static fire was performed on the 22nd. We're going to wait a minute, listen to the launch director. Brief.
20 hours, 33 minutes, 35 seconds. That is 4:35 p.m. Eastern. Still awaiting the final conjunction analysis report. The crew has just arrived in the suit-up room following the weather brief, and suit-up and leak checks are currently underway. Tracking no open issues at this time, though launch weather remains a watch item. Upper level winds currently looks acceptable for flight. We have no constraints performing any section of this procedure. A reminder, we will use procedure 52.911, crew contingency procedures, for any required crew contingency actions. One final reminder for handover CE&LD that at T-minus an hour, we'll ask that any personnel not intending to be in the room during propellant load and launch will need to clear out the subsequent 15 minutes. We'll look for all personnel to be in their seats, settled, and remaining in their position through ascent. Dragon separation at T plus 12 minutes and 2 seconds. Now over to CE for Falcon 9.
Falcon 9 is in good health. COPVs are at pressure. AFDS checkouts are complete, and we have a clean alarms board. We are proceeding down. No concerns on our end. No questions. Back to LD.
Thank you, CE, and MD for Dragon Health.
Good morning, LD. Dragon is healthy. We're not tracking any issues here for the countdown. Dragon has completed its prop tank pressurization and is in a good configuration for crew ingress. That's the next item that we'll be waiting for, and no issues at this time.
Thank you, MD. Next step with the crew, expect a walkout in about 45 minutes to begin the transport out to pad 39A. This concludes the countdown briefing. Thank you.
John Insparker back with you again at the webcast desk. That was SpaceX Launch Director Mike Taylor giving the situational briefing at T-minus 4 hours. Everything sounded well. You can see the Falcon 9 on the pad. As I mentioned, we static fired last week. The vehicle's been on the pad since then. We did the review of static fire. Everything looked good. Now we are getting ready for the crew ingress coming up, as the launch director said, a little bit later this morning. Now, most recently, activity on the Dragon late load cargo was put on a couple of days ago. Now we're ready for the crew to come out to the pad, down the access arm, and load into the capsule. Now, at the same time, we are also watching the weather. You heard the launch director talk about the weather brief we got 15 minutes ago. The tropical storm has begun moving onshore. That's actually improving conditions, both downrange in emergency splashdown locations if needed for Dragon, as well as at the launch site. We do expect, though, the probability of violating conditions is still 60%. The concerns at liftoff are going to be flight through precipitation, the thick cumulus crowds, and the possibility of violating the lightning rule. But right now, everything is still go. So with everything looking good from Hawthorne, we're going to send you down to Houston, where Gary Jordan is with the flight control team at NASA's Johnson Space Center in the Mission Control Houston. How are the teams looking down there, Gary?
Thanks, John, and welcome everyone to Mission Control Houston. Today, I'm joined remotely by NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn. From this room, we've been supporting humans aboard the International Space Station for nearly 20 years, nonstop, every single day. Crews from all over the globe have visited the orbiting station, but it's been almost 9 years since they started their journey into space from American shores. And while the teams here may appear subdued and focused, there's definitely an excitement around the entire center to be returning launch operations to America.
It really is, and our astronauts are thrilled to be taking a new spacecraft into orbit. This will be the new first for us, flying to space on a commercial vehicle, and the entire astronaut corps will be watching. As with every first flight of a system, there are still things to be learned and proven out, but we believe this crew and this system is ready. You know, many people think of Mission Control when they think of Johnson Space Center, but this center is also home to world-class training facilities and thought leaders in spacecraft development. We have drawn from both of these disciplines and spent the last 3 years alongside the SpaceX team to make sure the Crew Dragon is the best spacecraft possible and that the astronauts are prepared for every scenario.
And this mission comes at a critical time for the space station, with only 3 crew members currently aboard, among them NASA's Chris Cassidy as the lone American. Now I'm told we just had the formal handoff of the crew from the NASA team that has supported Hurley and Bacon in their 2-week quarantine over to the SpaceX team that'll get them suited up.
There will be a lot of firsts today, including a new suit for the crew to use during launch and entry. The crew quarters at Kennedy Space Center has supported human spaceflight for 5 decades, and now a new chapter is being written.
And it's exciting to witness it here today. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go back to the Kennedy Space Center to watch Suit Up in action as we continue to count down to launch. Leland.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Hey, Marie, this is amazing. We're in the suit-up room. I mean, I remember this back in 2009 when I was sitting in Lazy Boys from back in the Apollo era, but they have these really cool new suits and new seats that they're working in here. So
yeah, it's so amazing to see this first live look in the room. There's astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley sitting in those seats, being helped by the suit technicians. This room was first used for the first Apollo mission, Apollo 7, that they suited up in there in 1968. And there they are, giving a thumbs up. That looks like Doug giving a thumbs up there. Of course, Bob was mission specialist on STS-123 and STS-130. Bob's a native of St. Anne, Missouri, so I'm sure folks in his hometown are watching. Lots of hometown pride going on right now. And same for Doug. He was born in Endicott, New York, which happens to be my hometown, too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But he considers Apple Lake in his hometown, so I know folks are watching there. And Doug was the pilot on STS-127, STS-135, which was the final shuttle flight. So it's so cool to see them in there. Lauren and Leland, last time this room was used for this purpose that you see here was STS-135 in 2011, and Doug Hurley was one of the astronauts in there doing that. So this is really amazing to see.
Wow, so the suits are actually much more than just garments. They actually connect directly into Dragon seats. As you can see there, those GSC seats, or ground support equipment seats, are essentially replicas of the seats that are inside of the Dragon spacecraft. And the seats provide communications as through an umbilical, but also the ability to pressurize the suit if necessary. So right now what the suit team is doing is they're doing communications checks as well as a pressure check to make sure that the spacesuit can hold pressure in the event of a cabin depressurization emergency. This is the last time that we're going to do this check prior to the crew boarding Dragon, where we'll do it all again. So the way that leak check will work is we will provide or essentially inflate the suit with air and hold that pressure for a few minutes, watch the depressurization rate, and make sure that it stays within bounds.
And as we stay looking in the suit-up room, you can see Doug Hurley there in the seat. He is the spacecraft commander for Demo 2, and while he continues with checkouts, we want to give you a closer look at the veteran Marine Corps fighter pilot and spaceflight pioneer.
Excited?
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
You feel ready? Still pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Just the sensations, the rumbling, the shaking, the acceleration when the engines shut off and you go from, in the case of the shuttle, you go from 3 Gs to 0 Gs instantaneously and things start floating. And I remember distinctly just thinking, what just happened? to see a rocket launch in person is it's a pretty emotional event. I remember the first time I saw a shuttle launch, and it was amazing. And then when I saw a shuttle launch with my wife on it, that is quite the emotional experience. My name is Doug Hurley, and I'm the spacecraft commander for the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station. We are doing the first crewed flight for NASA and for SpaceX. So this is the test flight to prove end-to-end from launch to docking to ISS operations and then entry, descent, and landing. This will be the first time the Dragon had a crew on board, and so there's a myriad of objectives we want to achieve for this mission. SpaceX has been responsible for design and essentially making this vehicle what it is. What the astronauts bring to the table is the crew vehicle interface. What would work on orbit, what might not work on orbit, what would definitely work, to be able to just have the entire integrated team that's going to support us getting to and from space station, talking together, working through the challenges that simulators typically throw at you. It was really neat being part of it. It's just been an incredible undertaking to see where we've come just in the last 5 years that Bob and I have been a part of this, and to be, shortly flying to the International Space Station with the Crew Dragon. It overwhelms you to think about how many people have, in some way, shape, or form, touched this program and this vehicle to get us to this point. And we are the lucky ones that get to fly it, but we certainly not for 1 second take for granted the amount of effort that so many other people had to put into this to make it successful.
For Doug personally, he's worked so hard, through his entire life, to get to where we are right now. As a test pilot, this would be the dream, to fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so happy to see that he gets to be part of this mission, the spacecraft commander. I'm just glad to see his hard work and his dream come true for that.
It's been a long road in a lot of ways for not only us, but certainly for all the folks that work in the commercial crew program, as well as SpaceX in our case, just working to get to this point. It's been a huge amount of sacrifice and time away from home, but the fruits of our labor are coming to fruition.
We are now getting closer to when we expect to see the crew complete their suit checks and walk out of the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building.
And before they do, here's an introduction to the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2 and former Air Force flight test engineer, astronaut Bob Behnken.
When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the kind of the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, that's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task, proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to execute a test point and figuring out a way to collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light, is that light an expected light? What's the source of it? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is, a lot of things happen like that on launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour twice. Introducing NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000. went through the training program, primarily focused on the space shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing, or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now. It's been really interesting, I think, for both my wife and I to have gone through the process of seeing each other launch in space. I've seen her take that risk and had it be in front of her, and I've done that to her. There's just something different about watching a rocket launch when there are people on board. You feel a little bit differently about the pit of your stomach, and I can only tell you it's multiplied significantly when it's somebody that you know, and then somebody, of course, that's a family member. It's even multiplied more.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team, I'm helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this. Now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. When is the last time humans launched on a new vehicle? Certainly on the American side, it's been several decades. Now we're in a time when we've got multiple vehicles under development. It's a great time from a space exploration time frame just to see all that happening, and it's because of this nurturing of the environment, being able to pull in a wider group of people who can contribute towards human spaceflight. It's a super cool time. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is going to get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles and a launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
And we're back live in the room now with Bob Behnken on the left of your screen, Doug Hurley to the right. This is such a cool site here, Leland. This must bring back a lot of memories for you.
Marie, it really does. I mean, looking at these new suits and these new seats, it's a little different than what I experienced 11 years ago, but it's all the same. The suit techs, the people around you that have been with you, getting you ready for this mission, it's just an amazing moment, and they're getting excited. You can see, these military guys don't really get that excited. They don't show their excitement like civilians do, but it's a moment of history, and we're getting ready for this momentous occasion.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool. We heard that earlier this morning they stepped outside with a cup of coffee in hand. Oh, we've got some visitors in the room now. It looks like SpaceX founder Elon Musk to the right of your screen, and NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. Of course, you see a partition there to keep them a safe distance from the crew, but they're in there to say hello, wish them well before they depart the suit-up room. That's really cool to see there, and we can't hear what they're saying, but I'd love to be a fly on the wall in there right now.
Lauren, I wonder what Elon is saying.
Oh, just probably telling them how honored he is to be able to give them a ride today.
And I know the NASA Administrator, he talked about this yesterday. I mean, he's met with the crew before today even and said, I've told Bob and Doug, it's not too late to call this off if you have any second thoughts. And of course, they had none. They're super pumped about this, ready to go. And right now, it's just, we just need the weather to cooperate.
Yeah, I try to think who could potentially be more excited than the SpaceXers. Bob and Doug.
Yeah, right?
And it's amazing how we have commercial and government working together to send these two NASA astronauts to space safely. It's just it's a great combination of what we can do when we put our minds to things and be creative and innovative and work together as one community.
I totally agree, Leland. I see Bob and Doug walking around our headquarters in Hawthorne all the time. They're basically family members. They're in the cafeteria. They're getting a drink from the soda machine. Every now and then, there are times when the teams can have breakfast with them, which is really cool. And we call them the dads.
The dads.
They are dads.
They are, and they're incredible human beings. They really are. They're brilliant. They're sharp. They are excellent to work with, but they're just great people.
Yeah, no, I'm really inspired and honored to have known these two guys, and I can't wait to see them launch in space. And I was with you, Lauren, out at SpaceX when we were doing a little tour, and I think you kind of snuck me back in to where they were training, and I got a chance to see them working and training. But when they came back out, I was having lunch, and everyone around was just like, hey, these are our team also.
Yes, yes.
It's really amazing. And Lauren, you said, you talked about what they're like, and they are just two of the most humble people too. Every time I've seen them do an interview, they're getting asked questions about themselves, right? Because they're the stars of the show. They're the ones getting on the rocket, but they always bring it back to the people who made it possible for them. They're always talking about the NASA team, the SpaceX team working behind the scenes that have sacrificed so much to keep them safe and made sure that they are always vigilant. And I know we've talked about this before too, but if you're not looking for something wrong, you're not doing it right. So the teams, even now, they're always looking for any little thing that could go wrong to make sure that Bob and Doug are safe when they strap in and get going.
Absolutely. Around the office, we don't just say, oh, we're launching a rocket, we're launching Dragon. We say, we're launching Bob and Doug. And that human element of this is essentially leveling SpaceX up in a major way today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all the technology, all the hardware means nothing if it's all about the people.
Absolutely. And, we see just a handful of folks in the room, and we've acknowledged the distance that Mr. Musk and Mr. Bridenstine are standing from the astronauts, and of course they have masks on. This wouldn't really look that much different, though, even if we were not in the midst of a pandemic. Leland, you know very well what it's like to live in quarantine, getting ready for a mission, and so this coronavirus situation has just kind of underscored the importance of quarantine and keeping the astronauts protected. But can you speak a little bit about what it's like to live in quarantine, getting ready for a mission?
Yeah, we start in quarantine about a week before we come down to the Cape to get ready for launch. And I think that everyone around you that comes to the crew dinners, they have to get checked by the doctors. And so we really make this a very serious thing, even without a pandemic going on. But I think once we get down here, like we have these crew parties for our families, and we can't go to the parties, we have to FaceTime into the parties, but that's a very serious thing, and we only see our spouses at the beach house and have a dinner and celebrate this momentous moment. But it's a very serious thing, even without pandemics going on.
Absolutely. And obviously, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken are two of the best at what they do, and it's starting to really sink in that the mission is on as you see them in their suits there.
It's getting real. It's getting real.
So I remember the very first time that I saw Bob and Doug in these suits at a crew training event at SpaceX. Not only did they look really awesome, astronauts tend to look pretty cool, but the suits looked like they were from the future. Our team designed the spacesuits to maximize safety and functionality with a little bit of style. And so here's Chris Trigg telling us how the SpaceX spacesuit came to be.
I think one of the things that was important in the development of the suit was to make it easy to use, something that the crew just has to literally plug in when they sit down, and then the suit kind of takes care of itself from there. So the suit is really kind of one part of the bigger Dragon system. It's really part of the vehicle. So we think of it as kind of a suit seat system. So the seat that the crew is in and the suit are in a lot of ways working together. And so it made sense that we were designing Dragon in-house to also design the suit.
Our spacesuits is completely designed in-house. It's built here in Hawthorne, California, in the same building as the rocket and the capsule. The spacesuit is custom made for each crew member, and that is to optimize the fit for the crew member.
We definitely wanted to innovate and we wanted it to look inspiring, but first and foremost, we wanted it to be safe and reliable. The spacesuit's primary purpose is to protect the crew in the unlikely event that the cabin were to depressurize. But the suit does a number of additional things. It provides cooling and communication to the crew inside of the suit, provides them hearing protection, and the outer layer of the suit is flame resistant, so it provides flame protection as well. When the crew gets in the capsule, they get in their seats and they plug the suit into the umbilical that's attached to the seat. And the umbilical is providing everything that the suit needs. So it provides the avionics or electronics for communications, is providing the air to cool the suit, and then it also provides gas when needed to pressurize the suit. So it's really a single point that lets the suit do all the things that it needs to do. We designed the helmet in-house. The helmet serves a number of different functions. Obviously, it's protecting the crew's head and it's retaining gas like the rest of the suit, but it also houses the microphones as well as the valves that are regulating pressure in the suit. We had to design the gloves so that they would work with the touchscreens, but the gloves also still had to do a number of other things like the rest of the suit, so all of those things had to come together within the glove. It'll be obviously really amazing to see Bob and Doug in their flight suits, and I think one of the things that's cool about the suit is it's not just a piece of hardware, it's not just a suit, it's a very personal thing. It's Bob's suit and it's Doug's suit. And so seeing the two of them in their suits, using it in flight will be just a really amazing thing.
Hey, now that you've had a look at the development of the spacesuit, we thought it'd be pretty cool to show you where our astronauts train to be able to fly on board Dragon.
Yesterday, Dan and I had a chance to spend some time in our crew training facility here in Hawthorne, so let's take a look.
So we are up in the crew training area. This is right where Bob and Doug have been training over the last several months and even years to get ready for this flight. There's a couple of things in the room that we're going to show you real quick. We're going to start off with the cockpit simulator. Now, there are 4 seats inside of Dragon the way it's configured. The 2 in the middle are where the commander and the pilot's seat. So this is the commander seat. This is where Doug Hurley is for this flight. And this is the pilot seat. This is where Bob Bankin is. Once they're in their suits, they can plug them into the seats. They get communications, breathing air, pressurized gas for the suits themselves. Everything just integrated into Dragon systems. But most importantly, right in front of them, we have this set of 3 displays. And these are the touchscreen displays that give them access to Dragon. This is their window into their spacecraft. They're able to see all of the different systems. They're able to take control of Dragon. They're able to see where they are over the Earth or in relation to the space station. They're able to see even when thrusters are firing. And if you keep your eye on this little dot, you've been hearing some background noise. We actually have recorded noises of those thrusters that they're able to hear and see in real time while they're training. There's also some hard-coded buttons for some of the more important things, like the pyrotechnics, if they need to cut the main parachute after they land in the water, and of course the launch escape system. So they spend a lot of time in here just getting familiar with Dragon's control systems, but you need a bigger picture. You need to put it all together. And to do that, we can come over here where you just want something a little more higher fidelity, where you have everything from the seats, the displays, the cargo, all of it, just to really make sure you're training so by the time you get up to space, it feels like you've almost been there before. And that's where we're going to find Jesse.
Oh, hey there. I was just training for my next mission to space. But since you're here, let me show you around. This is our flight simulator, which is basically a one-to-one replica of a Crew Dragon vehicle as far as the functionality and the interior. So the astronauts can get suited up, they can practice entering and exiting the vehicle, they can climb into their seats and actually get strapped in. These seats recline back so that they can access these display panels, which are actually functional. And then they can practice flying the vehicle, manually docking with the space station. They can open and close the hatch. And basically, by the time they get to a day like today, they felt like they've already done the mission 100 times before. Well, I'm going to get back to training, so let's get back to launch.
We're coming up on T-minus 3.5 hours, and all continues to go well for today's launch. Now at the launch pad, Falcon 9 is powered on. Engine and stage checkouts were performed several hours ago. Everything's looking good on those. Now we're currently monitoring telemetry and pressurizing the gas storage vessels on board both the first and second stages. And as I mentioned, the good news is there's nothing significant to report on the rocket. Now on top of the Falcon 9 in the picture there, behind the crew access arm is the Dragon spacecraft. The spacecraft is ready for the crew who you saw suiting up. They'll be walking out here shortly. We'll bring that to you. Functional checkouts of the spacecraft were performed in preparation for the crew arrival. Most recently, the Dragon propellant system was pressurized to the final flight pressure just about an hour ago. And currently, all spacecraft systems are go. Right now on the pad, you can see some silhouettes in the access arm. The Ingress technician team is up there. They've opened the side hatch and now getting ready for the crew to arrive a little later this afternoon. Now the Air Force Range is supporting us today with air and sea space clearance. They've got no issues at this time. We're also releasing weather balloons. The initial balloons have been released. They don't give us a go for launch, but they start to tell us that things in the upper altitude are acceptable if this trend continues. So while we're going to wait on those results to give us a better idea, all the way down to about T-minus 30 minutes, we are anticipating acceptable weather for launch at the upper altitudes. And as you heard earlier, at the ground level, things look like they'll be improving through the afternoon as well as downrange. So things are looking good with both Falcon and Dragon. The weather is cooperating as we count down to liftoff. And we want to see where you're following today's launch from. So let's jump over to Tahira at our social desk.
Thanks, John. And I can tell you the excitement is really building online. Right now, we're up to 700,000 people viewing this broadcast, and Launch America is the #3 trending on Twitter in the U.S. So let's take a closer look at what's being said. Looks like we have Astro Joan, who is just so excited to be on the Space Coast and watching this launch from her driveway. And with that, so jealous to all of you in Florida right now that have the ability to just step outside and witness Bob and Doug make this historic moment. Let's take a look at another. So we have Dave Farrell, and this is the Dave Farrell, the bassist from Linkin Park, which is just sick in general. And it looks like his kids coined the term nerve-sighted for today's mission, and this is perfect. I was actually looking for a word to just describe the jitters and excitement leading up to launch. So Dave, thank you for that. I will be stealing that for today's show. So let's take just a broader look at the conversation online right now with this heat map of the United States. So you'll see that the more purple states show the states with the most mentions of Launch America. And with that, it looks like the Florida Space Coast is really coming alive for today's launch, followed by California, home of SpaceX, and Texas, where our mission control is. So great to see all these home teams showing up for today's historic mission. I want to toss it back to Florida, though, because I have to reiterate, if you have a chance to go to Florida and watch one of these launches in person, it's great. I watched my first one last year, and that was the uncrewed test flight of today's mission. And even then, uncrewed, I literally cried. I mean, you cannot describe the emotion that comes over to see this in person. So highly recommend, if you get a chance, go on down to Florida. For those of you just tuning in, we are using the hashtag #LaunchAmerica on NASA's social media channels. So join the conversation with us, and maybe we'll show it during the broadcast. So earlier in the show, we polled users on Twitter to see which of you watched the final shuttle launch in 2011, and the results are in. So looks like about 40% of you were able to watch the last shuttle launch, but 60% of you weren't. And I have to say, I'm not going to lie, I'm with those 60%. This will be my first time watching humans lift off to space from the U.S., and I am not kidding when I tell you I am literally thrilled to do this and share it with you all today. So the next question we have for you, as Bob and Doug finish their final suit checks, we would like to know if you were in the room with them right now, what would you say to them on social media? Use the hashtag #LaunchAmerica, and we'll... As Bob and Doug finish their final suit checks, we would like to know if you were in the room with them right now. What would you say to them on social? We would like to know if you're in the room with them right now, what would you say to them? Media. Use the hashtag #LaunchAmerica, and we'll show it later on in the show. Now let's head back to Marie at Kennedy. Marie?
All right, thanks to Hira. We're looking live at the back doors of the ONC building. Those are the iconic doors that Bob and Doug are going to be walking out in just a minute. But first, we want to pause to honor today's efforts with our national anthem. And the incomparable Kelly Clarkson treats us now with her virtual rendition from her home to yours.
Mose, can you see?
Years ago when I was going down that elevator and about to walk out those doors, it just brings back these memories of getting human beings to space, working together as a team, and having this entire community around you helping you get off the planet.
Yeah, and Leland, I know you have a really cool memory about somebody special that you saw when you walked out of those doors.
Oh my goodness, Marie, when I walked out of those doors, my chemistry teacher was right there from high school who inspired me to be a scientist. And she said, "Go Leland." That's what's going to happen when they come out. These people that, their families are going to be there. Wish other people could be there, but it's just an amazing moment.
Yeah, and the shot you just saw there with people carefully spaced apart, we saw them walk out right before the anthem started. It was Vice President Mike Pence along with Elon Musk and Jim Bridenstine. Of course, they left the building just ahead of the crew, so they are standing, we're looking now at the doors, but they're standing just right of that, across from the Teslas. There's also a designated spot for Doug and Bob's immediate family. There's a shot now, so we're looking at the back of Elon Musk, Jim Bridenstine, and Vice President Mike Pence. Of course, there's a small group of media there also, and so we kind of watch this very carefully to maintain social distancing and those that can't have the masks on. But there's the Teslas waiting for them. They got the meatball. There's the worm in the background and the worm on the back of the Teslas. So, Leland, I know we were talking about this earlier. You had some mixed feelings about the worm, right?
I mean, the worm, the meatball, when I was at NASA, Langley, we changed over to the meatball from the worm. So, Lauren, I know you love the worm.
Worm all day.
All day, really?
All day.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I love that the worm is so retro, and it's only fitting that it would be making its way back, bringing the historic, just opulence of NASA's past to the present. Yeah, no, thank you.
But I mean, the chevron and the meatball goes back to Langley's traditions when it was, aviation, and that gets back to that heritage and that history too. So.
I guess, sure. Okay, truce.
Orbits.
Or truce.
I feel like this is a microcosm of what's happening online about the worm. But the meatball's not going away. It's a worm meatball partnership.
There we go.
So there's another view there of the crosswalk. There is where Bob and Doug are going to walk out any moment. Of course, they're going to get their photo taken by all the paparazzi there, and we're just standing by for them to walk out. I'm going to check the time, actually, 1:13. So if they walk out any minute now, they're going to be right on schedule to start their final goodbyes and waving to folks. And I'm sure they're going to pause for a photo op. But this is just really amazing. Haven't seen this site since 2011 with STS-135. Of course, Doug Hurley was the pilot on that mission. So this is a really incredible moment.
Yeah, and one of the crewmates that was with him was Rex Ball. We're going to talk to you later. And we have, oh, here they come.
Here they come. NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. They've each made this journey twice before for the space shuttle missions, but they've never done this in a SpaceX spacesuit. They've never done this together, and they've never done this on their way to head to a commercial and spacecraft to head to space.
Marie, I was looking for that Astro van, and I see these white Teslas with meatballs and worms on them. It's just a new era in space travel.
Oh yeah, they're riding in Tesla Model X's. They've been equipped with cooling units, so once they sit inside, that umbilical that I was referring to earlier will connect to the spacesuit to provide cooling while they're inside of the vehicle.
And you can see them talking and waving with their families now. We just saw them do a virtual hug with their sons.
Here's Megan and Karen and their sons, yeah.
They're the dads.
The dads, yeah.
It's so awesome.
Bob blowing his family a kiss. Doug actually got to take his wife and son up to the pad on the tower. Yesterday they tweeted out a photo. That was so cool.
I saw that picture, and it had a prominent worm in the picture, right?
Yes.
Telling you, worm all day. So they're climbing through those DeLorean doors of the Model X. This is totally from the future.
Are they stock? Are they stock Teslas?
And then you see in the front seat there, that's our flight surgeon. He's climbing in, and the suit technicians, there's one, Chris Trigg right there, number 12. He is buckling in. They're both, the two suit techs are buckling in, Bob and Doug, and they're connecting that umbilical.
And Lauren, I know you mentioned this earlier, but for folks that maybe weren't watching then or can't remember, I mean, we're in Florida. It's super hot, super muggy. So how are they staying cool?
There are these portable cooling units. We had one at the ONC building, or sorry, two at the ONC building. There are two in the Teslas. There'll be two in the elevators, and then two in the white room when they arrive on the crew arm. So we're just keeping that cool air flowing through the suits. There's actually ducting integrated into the suits to keep them cool. And you can see they're saying goodbye to their families. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome that their families get to come up to the window and obviously get a little closer than everybody else.
There's Megan and her son. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
These are precious moments. This is what it's all about, as I mentioned before. It's about the people. It's about the families and working together as one community to get Doug and Bob launching off to the cosmos, to the space station.
Yeah, it's emotional. It's emotional watching that.
It really is. Here we go.
Now, as we see the convoy begin the journey to the pad, 39A, we are thinking about each and every one of you, our colleagues and friends at SpaceX and NASA, who have had a hand in seeing the Crew Dragon commercial crew program come to life.
And we wish every single one of you could be here up close to see this, but we want you to be a part of this journey regardless of where you are watching today. And so for the next few minutes, while they're making their way to the pad, we want to highlight those people whose hands and words and thoughts built all that we see here today. And we hope all of you watching can feel that pride that each of these NASA and SpaceX team members has for today.
This is Laura Segura from the Commercial Crew Program. We're so excited about this historical day. Congratulations on being a part of the very first mission for human space flight, commercial human space flight ever. We're behind you, Bob and Doug.
I'm Nicole from
at SpaceX in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Congratulations to SpaceX for hitting another major milestone, and safe travels to Bob and Doug.
Bob and Doug, as the launch vehicle chief engineer, we've got a lot of our launch vehicle team here to wish you a very wonderful safe ride on a Falcon 9. Coming up to Demo 2, we're so excited for you. And launch America, it's time to launch. Let's go. Right.
Hi, this is Perla from Hawthorne headquarters. We want to wish Bob and Doug a safe trip to the International Space Station.